still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Well, hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and thank you again for joining me. Just to share a little bit about me, I'm so grateful that I have a listening audience, and one of the reasons why I do the podcast is because I like making a difference, a positive difference in people's lives, and I have had the opportunity to touch many people in such a positive way, and it's very inspiring when I see other people who are able to make a positive difference. And in as much as I appreciate what they do because it's inspiring, it is also something that I like to feel I want to contribute to. And I'm led to share this with you because I was very rewarded by some of the comments that my executive producer shared with me a little bit ago. And it was just one of those positive things in life, and I like being able to share that. So thank you again for listening. On my way in to record today, I had the pleasure of talking to an old friend who had sort of dropped off the radar. They were dealing with a few issues, and they just kind of wanted to resurface and share with me some of the things that they were going through. And without doing a whole lot of setup on that, we talked a great deal. And I've mentioned in the past about this friend because there was an awful lot of loss, tragedy. There are deaths in the family, and coming back from that has been a journey of quite a journey, I would say. And we were talking again today about a friendship and the difference that I made. So it's kind of nice. I had my executive producers saying something today, and he was not aware of the conversation I had with my friend earlier. And I've always felt like I would be a resource when people wanted to talk. I've done this a long time, kind of a listening ear, because I like to approach that being non-judgmental and giving an individual a safe place to share what they have to say and hopefully steer them in a direction that works for them. You know, we're all individuals looking to find our way in the world and be loved and to learn how to love. And ultimately, that's a part of our happiness. So to pivot from that to my topics today, have you ever had that experience where somebody just sort of disappears out of your life and then they sort of reappear? I'm talking about a date, a lover, somebody of that capacity. They just sort of just reappear, and you wonder, what's that about? There's a lot of things that would go through my mind. And let's say if it were a girlfriend that had disappeared, decided they didn't want to be in a relationship, or somehow that's the message that I got. And then they sort of reappear 3 or 4 months later. I ran across a term, and I hadn't, I just stumbled across something that I was reading. It's called submarining. And I said, wow, that is an interesting term. And it just means what I described. They sort of drop below the surface and then they reappear. And, what do you make of that? Well, one of the things that came across my mind, and I've done a little bit of soul searching, is there have been relationships that I've been in with women who have been around and we've experienced each other, and let's say there's just a breakdown of communication. They go their way, and I kind of don't chase them because that might seem like the stalker type, and that's definitely not myself. And then they sort of reappear. And I had this experience, a long time ago, and it was the experience of something that I had said to this woman, and I had explained to her that says, I don't really feel like you could appreciate me until you've lived life a little more. And what I was talking about was, it seemed that there were experiences that she hadn't had in life. She had been married a little while, had gotten divorced, and hadn't dated much after that. And then she and I met. Well, I thought that just by virtue of the fact that she had been married a while, she really had had a lot of experience with life, and she hadn't. And what ultimately came up was we were not communicating very well, and we both decided for a change. Well, she disappeared, dated a while, and then sort of reappeared in my life. This is the sort of why I use the explanation of the submarine, because I read about that term. And it was after having had that experience, she came back to appreciate me a little better. And, we remained friends for quite a while. But it was during this period away in which she actually had an opportunity to date a number of people. Now, I use the term submarining as if to describe her leaving and then coming back. Well, it was probably, maybe it wasn't submarine because this was more intentional. She didn't just disappear, but I think to describe that she had left and then wanted to rekindle the relationship. I mean, I felt happy to see her because, whatever it was that broke the relationship apart before, I am the kind of person that I don't hold on to stuff. I just tend to let it go and move on with life, because I see holding a lot of grudges, it just creates a lot of tension and just bad memories, and I'm not looking to do that. But I was pleased to see her, but she was a changed person, and she had matured, at least relationship-wise, to be able to have conversations about things that we couldn't talk about before. Because she found some of the new dates that she had gone on, and she chose them, or I guess they chose each other, but she found things about them that she didn't like, which at one time she probably would have settled for, but then having gone out with me, she changed that a bit. So how do I make this about you, my listener? What I wanted to relate to, or want you to relate to, is those kinds of experiences in your life. And what do you do with that? Do you reinvest in that person? Or do you just say it's in the past? And these things can be dicey. Well, now, if you are currently in a new relationship, it probably does not serve you to reinvest in that past relationship. If there's conversations that you can have, some would probably be of value, because you might feel validated for having been yourself. And if there were some principles that you were standing up for when the relationship ended, and they just couldn't see eye to eye, well, do those things still apply? And if they do, great. You learned that standing up for yourself, validating yourself, is very important. And maybe you learned something in the separation about either something you might change about yourself, and if you would communicate that, and that could be something that you are now working on in your new relationship. But it's about, what do you do with that information? I think you can own it, file that away, and benefit from it. But I want you to remember your boundaries about what you do. You want to share with the person that, hey, I'm with somebody else and I'm not going to end that relationship. But if you are still single, you're still available, and you're trying things out, with other people, it might be worth reinvesting. It's nice to feel the validation from someone who has some experience in who you are and to tell you what a great person you are. Those strokes feel very good. And it's not just about ego, but there are times when, those messages of sincerity really show a welcome change in someone else's attitude towards you and sort of an acceptance of who you are. And that always feels good. Acceptance feels wonderful. And I would say embrace it when you can. Respect it, embrace it. That's my philosophy. I'm going to take a break and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I'm your host, John Johnson. I had a conversation with, I received an inquiry where the inquiry had to do with, initiating communication, sex, stuff like that with your partner. And this is a lady who had been in a marriage for a long time, and one of the ideas that she sort of had embraced is that it is the man's job to initiate romance. And by that, I mean more the sexual part. And, we can debate how we feel when we want somebody else to meet our needs. But when you have a partner, sometimes you have to speak up. So there is that aspect of it. And I'll try to remember to touch on that in a minute. But more directly, this is a relationship. I mean, they've been married a while, and the sex has pretty much been non-existent for a long time. And it's about how do you initiate, how do you rekindle that interest? And one of the things that I mentioned, and I said it in a way that I hope that you, my listener, can grasp, is sometimes when we get into a routine of doing things, say it's, we've not been intimate in a long time, or in any kind of way, we haven't done something in a long time, and it is in your mind that is something you want to address. It is perfectly okay to talk about it, to address it, to bring it to the surface, because we get very busy in our lives, in our relationships. We do things sometimes out of routine, whether we're being a provider, whether we're being a caregiver. And when we get into that space, there are lots of things that we tend to forget. Sometimes we're in that space and we're operating in a state of overwhelm. So everything doesn't make it into our minds to do it. And when you're in a partnership like that, I mean, she's in a marriage, but when you're in a partnership, then you kind of depend on each other for support and to sort of be that post-it note, to be a reminder, to be a helpmate, all of these kinds of things. And as I've said many times on my podcast, I'm talking about how important it is to have communication and to develop ways of communicating things so that you feel comfortable, you feel like you're being heard. And no matter what the subject is, we're willing to bring it up. So she's going to have to work on that part. But the idea of sitting and waiting for someone else to make the first move, this is something that you can carry forth with you in all of your relationships. You don't have to wait for somebody else. In fact, waiting, well, it doesn't make it any better. But it almost seems in some certain situations that it's kind of game playing. And that's certainly not what you want to convey in any of these experiences. Sometimes bringing it up is very difficult because it may be a hot topic. There may be some shame around it. And most certainly there's mystery around a lot of these things, because when we don't talk about things openly, or we haven't created the space to be able to do that, when we get into some of these more thornier subjects to want to talk about, we feel really, really apprehensive. So I think it's really important that you convey your feelings like, hey, I'm scared to talk about this a little bit because I want it to go well. Say those kinds of things, because that gets it out there. And it also helps up the level of seriousness, not the drama, because that's not what we're talking about, but I said seriousness, the sincerity with which you want to have a conversation. And when you practice doing that sort of thing, you are creating a wonderful space to have the kinds of conversations about all subjects. And when you get really practiced at this, you realize it doesn't take a long time to talk about things. I mean, it certainly gives you the opportunity to talk about it as long as you want. But, and this is something I'm going to communicate to women. For men, sometimes these conversations are very scary, because what happens in a guy's mind is he first hears something in the way that he failed to do something right. And women, if you're communicating to a guy, I think the first thing you want to let him know is that everything is okay. I don't think you failed or you've let me down or anything like that. Because when you do that, then you've got a listener. Then he's not apprehensive about having conversations with you about important topics. And it's, that works on the validation thing about that they're okay. And I think you will have a much more active listener. And it also helps to have him participate and to ask open-ended questions. Guys will search for questions that you ask, and they almost figure out, okay, if I say this, this is going to make her happy. But learn to ask open-ended questions, because, and for example, an open-ended question is something that there isn't some sort of automatic default answer to. Because if the idea is to really get his honest reaction, then it's about you listening to the response, not him always saying the one thing you want him to say. Because guys are really good at figuring out, what is it she wants me to say? Because I want the drama to be over. Because that's a really scary place. Because guys perceive that, look, once the drama starts, I lose. And I lose big. And that's something men really do not want that in their life. They don't want it in the relationship. And I mean that from a standpoint of, because a guy does not want to seem like a failure. He really wants to be a hero in his relationship. But going back to the point of asking open-ended questions, sometimes, and if this is new, remember I talked about creating the space so that you can have conversations, authentic conversations. If this is new, he may struggle with this because it may be the first time that he's ever felt like, okay, she really wants to know what I think. And he may struggle putting the words together so that he could even have the answers. Because guys don't necessarily operate in that space of really giving an authentic answer to you, their partner. Because remember, quite often what guys are looking to do is they're looking to be a pleaser. They're looking to answer the question so that they don't get in trouble. But when it comes down to understanding their own feelings, and sometimes they do, and some guys can be really good at answering these questions and really enjoy the conversation. And you can help them learn to enjoy the experience when you're asking them authentic, open-ended questions so that they can answer you, and then you respond to their answer in a way that says, well, thank you for answering. Thank you. And in turn, in doing that, you're setting an example for how you want the relationship to go. And I encourage you, women who are listening to this, I encourage you to encourage him to be just as thoughtful, because it's certainly a validation of you by, number one, you've taken the initiative, which is what I was suggesting to my friend to do. Look, take the initiative, open the conversation, and be open to the experience. And it takes a little practice. It takes a while to kind of gather this up and move it forward. But I guarantee that you'll be much happier with the outcome because, number one, the answers are going to be authentic. Again, you may struggle with this at first, but with a little practice, the answers are going to be authentic. You'll be able to support each other, and you'll get to a place where you're able to have difficult conversations and work through them. And for the conversations that might be a little more difficult to have, I would suggest that you handle it in stages. You don't have to go through everything all at once, because that could make it a really long lecture. And quite often, we don't do a good job of staying on track. We kind of get off on tangents and get off into the weeds. But let's set a time limit for these kinds of things, and you generally have a much better outcome, because I think at the end of the conversation, and you should say this, at the end of the conversation, we are still going to be together. We're still going to enjoy each other, and there are no wrong answers. I want to emphasize that when people are being authentic, and especially when they're in the learning process of being authentic, there are no wrong answers. But sometimes we need to have a chance to verbalize, put out there, think out loud, so to speak, and then, whittle it down, work down to what works best. So I'm going to end that, and I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And in that last segment, I was talking about giving yourself permission to take initiative. And I was directing a lot of the conversation towards women, because the conversation that it sort of inspired me to talk about that was, I was talking to a friend who'd been in a long-term marriage, and one of the things that she had felt was missing was some of the romance. And, I had encouraged her to take the initiative, because being that they had been living their lives, and sometimes we just get out of practice for doing things. And, it's an opportunity to have communication around the topic. But it was really to tell her to give her perfect permission to go ahead and initiate some sort of romantic contact with her husband. And I said, I think it's perfectly all right. I'm sure he would probably appreciate knowing, because he's more of the silent type, and he doesn't necessarily talk about these kinds of things openly. He's sort of sheepish, but yeah, he's a good guy. But I think given the nature of what it is we're talking about, that she take the initiative, she will certainly get a response. And I encourage her to do that. Now, on the flip side, and I'm going to talk to the guys who are listeners of this podcast, and it's to say it is perfectly okay to take initiative. If your partner, she approaches you and wants to, certainly don't feel emasculated because a woman approaches you. Because that, you got to understand, if this is not something that normally happens, then realize that person is taking a huge risk and they're risking rejection. So on the other hand, again, this is to the guys, women appreciate it when you take the initiative also, because it signals an interest. And understanding how important romantic overtures are, whether it's the cards, whether it's a peck on the cheek, whether for some people it could be a text message in the afternoon or a note left in a really inconspicuous spot or a conspicuous spot. Whether it's a Post-it note, put it on the mirror, put it on the seat in the car, something. I think we all appreciate that. And again, to the guys who sometimes forget, and not on purpose, but as guys, we kind of get into our routines of just doing what we do. Whether it's get in a car, we drive to work, thinking about, the responsibilities that we have and wanting to pay, time and attention to those things. Sometimes we neglect our partner, and we got to remember to put that in our thought process as well. And remember, take initiative. And I say this because sometimes if we wait and we wait for the reminder, then we really feel bad because we feel like we've been neglecting, been ignoring it. And, you feel like you're kind of in the doghouse because, you had to be reminded of that. So take initiative. Listen to this podcast. Think about it. Take initiative because I'm inspiring you to do that, and you will feel a lot better. And I think you will also know that you will get validation, you will get appreciation, and all of those feel goods that happen because you made the choice to be proactive rather than having waited. You see, that always feels good when someone is proactive in, to your benefit. Something else I want to kind of round out this podcast with is think about what you would like to improve on in your relationship. And the kinds of things I'm talking about, it's not just communication, because that's always something that we're constantly working on. And sometimes that even gets better just because we become more and more familiar with each other. But I'm talking about something real specific. What would you like to improve on in your relationship? Is it your quality time? Not just spending time together, but I'm talking about the quality of the time that you spend together. Doing something that both of you enjoy and can appreciate, and it helps with you appreciating each other. And would you like to improve on how you relate to your children? This is a very important skill to have because as it is, it kind of comes back on you. The way you relate to your kids, you set an example, how you talk to them, and in terms of what your expectations are for them, how they respond to you, how they behave in life, how they respond to other adults. See, these are life skills. These are the kind of things that you can actually see measurable results. Quite often, I talk to parents who have children who seem to have behavioral issues. And we have to think about, okay, where does a lot of that start? And in conversations, I tend to find out sometimes children get rewarded for poor behavior, or the parents make bad choices for the kids, and the kids tend to pick up on it. Kids are very manipulative, and that's just by nature. And I'm not saying that in an undermining sense. They don't necessarily try to undermine their parents, but people figure out how, in their way of operating, to get their needs met. And in terms of how to approach a parent, they know when a parent is a softie and they can sort of, nibble things around the edges and get what they want. And it's just when those kinds of choices that the kids want are not very good choices for them, but as a parent, we don't set boundaries, then we tend to reward poor behavior, poor choices, and it sort of becomes exponential. So it's about correcting some of that. So that's something that you might want to work on in your relationship. That is with your significant other. We figure out, okay, how are we going to parent the kids so that we're on the same page? Another thing you might want to consider, that's something to work on, and it helps with the quality of the relationship. If you are having money issues, and I share this, now this can become a very big topic in most relationships. Sex, money, and children tend to be the three things that really generate a lot of heat in relationships when there isn't some compatibility happening here. So talking about money and how we're going to budget for things so that we can do the things that we want and that we have a bit of a cushion when things happen that we don't expect. These are some topics I want you to think about. I want you to talk with your partner about. And as I've talked about before, there are ways in which you can approach these things in which we don't feel like you're being jumped or made to feel ashamed. And these could be difficult subjects. But when we do talk about them before they become a crisis, at least we can create some sort of plan of action. So that's the idea, and I hope you carry that forward. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast, and I want to thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.